And so if your husband is not leading or not leading well, not doing the things he should be doing, it is hard and a long path sometimes for a wife to win her husband over by her quiet demeanor, as Peter says. Hey friends, this is Snake on the Table. I'm Tanner Cartwright here with Jerry Doris. And what's our snake, bro?
This is another question that we got, and I think it was a follow-up to the one we did on if your husband's not leading in the home.
Yes. Yeah. What should a wife do?
Yeah. And this was the question. And I'm just distilling a big letter down.
Yep.
What should a wife do if her husband can't stand her family? Meaning they don't want to do it. He won't do anything with them. Doesn't want to do Christmas, Thanksgiving, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, she goes on to explain in this specific instance, he has gotten to where he just will not be around them.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want to go at all. He'll let them go.
Yeah.
But he won't go at all. So what should she do? Because that, frankly, is a horrible situation for a wife to be in.
Yeah. She's saying they're combative towards each other.
Yep.
There's zero harmony that's happening. And then she's mentioning how the husband is okay with her doing stuff, but he will have nothing.
He will have nothing to do with them. And it's even more awkward because at the end of the little question, the question, she tells us that they all go to church together.
Yeah. Okay.
So her family and her husband go to church together.
So the answer to this is we don't know.
Yeah. Go talk to your pastor. No.
This is incredibly complex.
Sure.
This one was really complex.
Yeah.
But I think this is a common thing, and that's why we wanted to tackle it and talk about it.
Well, and frankly, the principles that you would apply in something like this apply to not just this, but how should a woman deal with a situation where her husband just doesn't want to do X,
yeah,
or is not doing X, or is doing whatever that is. And so what can she do? What should a wife's response be when she sees something her husband's doing this, at the very least not healthy, it's not good, but it's not blatant sin necessarily.
Yeah,
it might be.
Yeah.
But it's a little ambiguous. So what is she to do?
Yeah, we had talked about this the last time, and when it's sin, I think a wife has the warrant to go to her pastor and to talk to them.
Yeah.
But when we say that doesn't negate what it does say in 1 Peter 3
yes.
about winning without a word.
Yes.
And that quiet demeanor. And I said I might do it the last time. I am going to cut in here at some point a sermon clip that I did on that, just to recognize this is a long path sometimes.
Yeah.
And you've got to be patient. You've got to allow that passage in 1 Peter 3 is a long game strategy.
Yes.
And so this isn't maybe even a solution for this Christmas or this Thanksgiving, or any of that kind of stuff.
10-year plan.
Yeah, this is a longer plan here.
I know that can sound very discouraging to say that, but
yeah, because you want harmony, you want reconciliation.
So let's read the verse, the whole thing. In the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. Peter is suggesting a course of action for wives caught in a marriage where the husband is disobedient to the word. If he were writing a book, he might entitle it this: How to Win Your Man to the Word Without a Word. Now let's note first that this is not a guaranteed strategy. He's not guaranteeing that this is going to work. And second, note that the emphasis is on what you are to do and not what he's going to do. This is what you can do in your marriage. Meaning, as Christians, changed by Christ, pursuing Christ, following in the steps of Christ, your behavior as a Christian may be the way a disobedient spouse is won to be obedient to the word. This is the course. Let me put it this way. Listen, there are no extra steps that you need to take other than pursuing Christ-likeness to perhaps win your husband to be conformed to the word. It's not a special plan that you've got to go through. Just be Christ-like, following his steps and how you respond. Act like Jesus. That's the advice all of us need to hear, right? We all need to hear that. Regardless of our marital status, if we're pursuing Christ and being conformed to his image, following in his steps, when stress comes upon us and we act in this way, we're doing all what we should be doing. And so this is for the unmarried as well. You're practicing how you respond now to stress in your life. You are practicing how you will respond to stress in your marriage. Is there any hope of winning your husband or your coworker or your boss or your mom or your children by acting like the world? No. Well, what other course do we have? If we're going to win them to Christ, we need to act like Christ. We're not going to win them to Christ by acting like the world. Okay, so let's look at this passage. We have a couple hurdles to overcome in this passage. First is our propensity to gravitate to extreme situations. And I'm going to test that limit here in a minute. The farthest extreme I could think of. Secondly, this passage has been abused by the church to keep women in abusive marriages. Sometimes the church has valued the institution of marriage more than the person in the marriage, the abused wife. And that's wrong. And so we want to correct that. So this phrase, disobedient to the word, is really a broad category. I mean, me speaking harshly to my wife when I am irritable because I didn't get enough sleep or because there's stresses happening in my life and I snap at her or something like that, that's wrong. That's disobedient to the word. That's sinful. But sleeping around and going on drinking binges, coming home after a week only to beat her would be disobedience to the word as well. That's quite a spectrum there of disobedient to the word. What kind of husband does Peter have in mind who is disobedient to the word? Let's explore the extreme. Let's start there. Consider the monster. Do you guys know who John Wayne Gacy is? He was a serial killer in the 70s who murdered 33 men and boys and hid their bodies beneath his home in Chicago, Illinois. But in June of 1972, he remarried his second wife, Carol Hoff, and he brought her into that house. Now, Carol would often complain about the smell that was coming from beneath the house, and John would tell her it's just moisture buildup in the crawl space. But it was where he was keeping these bodies. Clearly, her husband was disobedient to the word. That's extreme, right? Well, there are other types of monsters. Selfish husbands who verbally abuse, physically abuse, and are master manipulators. They are domineering, and you submit to their leadership not out of joy, but fear and terror. You are held in place because of fear of what they might do to you or they might do to your children. Wife, hear me. That's not who Peter has in mind when he says disobedient to the word. He's not suggesting that you must grin and bear it under abuse. God has created spheres of authority for your protection. And such a man needs to be exposed. And both the church and the state should be rushing to your aid, not giving cover for your abuser. You are not obligated to stay with a man who is an abuser of you and an abuser of your children, or an abuser of your children. Absolute authority belongs exclusively to God. No one other than God has absolute authority. The authority given to a husband is for your good, not your harm. It's for your leadership. It's for your provision and your protection. An abuser is liable to the court of man and should he be a professing believer, he's liable to the church and should be put out of the church. That's the extreme. That's pretty extreme, right? Sorry. Let's consider the non-Christian husband. Let's go more to the middle ground here. Sometimes husbands neglect their covenantal duties because they're simply not Christians. They're not regenerate. And so they do not accompany you to church. They do not pray with you at home. They do not desire the things of God because they do not desire God. They're not of God. but they love you fiercely. And they're gentle with you, and they care about you. And they provide and they protect you as they know best and how they know best. And of course, you love them. And you submit to their diminished leadership, hoping one day they will be soundly saved. I think we're getting warmer to who Peter is talking about. And others certainly have taken this passage that way. And as I said, you certainly won't win them to Christ by acting like the world. Right? But I don't think that's who Peter's ultimately having in mind for a couple reasons. One, your husband needs the gospel. And the gospel is not communicated without words. Who better to explain the gospel than your husband's chief counselor? Your husband's capable confidant. You can speak to him in a way that no one else can speak to him, should you have that fierce love relationship with them. And I also think, secondly, that the context tells us Peter has a believing husband in mind. So let's consider third, the farthest on the other side, let's consider the Christian husband. Skip down to verse 7. Now, our brother Joel Jones here will be teaching us from this in just a couple weeks. Right, Joel? Okay, good. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, it says this. Remember, this is just the next verse after our section where we're talking about husbands and or wives. It says, you husbands in the same way live with your wives in an understanding way as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. He addresses the husband. And he gives the husband who is being disobedient to the word a jab in the ribs to say, hit it, brother. Can believing husbands, church-going husbands, outward-looking pious husbands, can they be failing in their duties to lead, to provide, and protect? Yes, absolutely. And godly wives are desperate for them to step up and to lead in the home. I think that's who he's talking about. But it applies to all of those contexts. What else will we do? All right, ladies, listen. The text says that you may win your husband to the word without a word as they observe your behavior. Observation is a long game. It's a long view strategy. This is not a short-term fix. Here we must re-ask the question, what has submission to Christ produced in you? Is he brash you and loud you and old you? It wants a solution now. But as a follower of Jesus, be patient and play the long game. Be pure and respectful, entrusting yourself to him who is before all, and in him all things hold together. That's your course of action.
Yeah, well, 100%. And so we have to recognize at the onset. Recognize at the onset. I knew it sounded wrong. That this is a harder thing for a woman than this would be if it was reversed.
Yeah.
So you've seen the graph where it's like if a man comes to Christ, 90% of the time the whole family comes to Christ. Well, if it's a woman, it's 40%.
Yeah.
And what that points us to is that husbands are less likely to follow their wives.
Yeah.
And so if your husband is not leading or not leading well, not doing the things he should be doing, it is hard and a long path sometimes for a wife to win her husband over by her quiet demeanor, as Peter says.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah. You had outlined, I sent that to you in text, and you had outlined a couple things. I'd like to hear that. I think they'd like to hear that too.
Yeah, so there's so many variables in that kind of situation. So I'd written this. There's three possible explanations. One, he's a selfish jerk.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, for that lady that's in that situation, don't go calling your husband that. I'm just saying that for anyone thinking about this, your husband don't want to be around your family. Well, maybe he's just a selfish jerk. And him being inconvenienced by her family he's not willing to do that in order to love his wife well.
Right.
Which is just him being selfish, obviously. So number 2 option is that the family is a real pill. And that's an option.
Is that the real word you used there?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
A real pill. Pain in the tush.
Tushy, yeah.
So it could be that her family is just obstinate and wants to push him and fight him on stuff. So I've known men that married, wives, and their wives have followed them into a godly, biblical, kind of house. And she came from a feminist, liberal, horrible family background. And they're just wanting to fight all the time about that stuff.
Yeah.
And so that creates a lot of tension, a lot of problems. You could see where a man's like, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law yapping and griping, and it just shoo-wee.
Yeah.
So there's a Greek word that anyway. There's a Greek word.
What are you saying?
And I'd have to look it up because I don't remember. But it literally means a griping, bickering woman.
Okay.
And it's a single word.
Okay.
And so it's just a reality that old women can be gripey and
we have a word like that in
English.
In English as well, brother.
Yes, we do, but we shan't say
We
it.
will not say that.
Yeah, I should know the Greek and not that one.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Anyway.
All right, so what's your third thing?
So the third one is, possibility is that there have been unresolved problems that had built up to just a point of exasperation. So there's been some tension in the past. It wasn't dealt with.
Yeah.
And now over time, it's just created more and more and more of a struggle and a tension.
Yeah.
And so now it's just like, I just don't want to deal with it, honey.
Yeah.
So in my mind, those are the three, or a combination of all three. But so there's a lot that could be worked through here. If I was talking to the husband, obviously my counsel is going to be very different than if I'm talking to the wife in this situation. But if I'm talking to the husband, I'm going to be like, dude, you need to actually lead and make a decision here. Either the family is so horrific, they're a pill, they're a problem, and they are literally teaching your children wrong. They're literally causing problems and disunion in your house to the point that y'all don't need to be there. And that hurts, but you need to make that decision with your wife.
Sometimes that's necessary.
It's necessary. Cut it off.
Yeah.
Cut the head off the snake. Be done with it. And just be like, sorry. If y'all are not, a lot of times husbands have to set up boundaries with their in-laws for the sake of their wife.
Yeah.
Be like, listen to me, dude, to your father-in-law or your mother-in-law. If you're going to act like this, we're not coming for Thanksgiving. We're not coming for Christmas.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it's killing my wife. It's killing me. It's harming the relationship with you and your grandchildren. We're just not doing it.
You're talking about a crucial conversation between man to man with the father.
Yes.
Hopefully he's the leader. More than likely we're talking about a matriarch home, and she's the one that's actually in charge. But he still needs to honor that. He would have a conversation with that man about whatever those tensions are.
Yes. Be like, dude, if you start fighting us over this, I'm going to tell all the kids to get their shoes on, and we're out.
Yeah.
Okay? And set those boundaries.
That's a boundary, yeah.
Set the boundaries.
So I would set that. That's a boundary that you might give to somebody that they might not have. But I'd also set some different boundaries. If I were talking to this guy, I'd say, hey, man, set some boundaries. Meaning, hey, wife, we're going to show up. We're going to be there at this time, and we're going to leave at this time.
Yeah.
So that's a boundary.
Yeah.
We're not. This isn't an all-day affair. We're going to do X, Y, or Z. We're going to set some boundaries. And moms and dads do not like those boundaries, but they need to respect them because, as she noticed, she needs to submit to her husband.
Yes.
That kind of stuff.
So either that, the man needs to approach it in that either he can set boundaries and go for the sake of his wife and relationship with her family, which is important, and is not something that he can just cut off and it'd be okay. That's a heavy thing. So either that, or he just needs to set boundaries, cut it off, or he's the problem.
That would be your counsel to him. My counsel to her would be to suggest those boundaries, to say, sweetie, if we went and we left at such and such time, would that be acceptable?
Yeah.
Would that be something you could endure it for 3 hours? And if he says no, you've got to deal with that. So I want to go to a different level. I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm thinking about because we just don't know the situation. So pastorally, I would want to really dig into this. I would be
100%.
listening for a long time. So this is counseling from the hip.
Yes.
On something like this. But more than likely, his pride is being provoked. There's things that are being said or done by the mom, or more than likely the mom,
usually,
that is just sets him off and makes it uncomfortable for him. And so in those situations, I've often talked to the wife to say, I think you need to have a crucial conversation, meaning it's a very important conversation with your mom to say, look, this is very triggering for my husband. When you criticize him, when you do this, and I'm working on this side because I want to see us all come together. But you could help us tremendously if you will not bring up these topics, if you will not challenge his authority here, if you won't do these kind of things. To get those kind of things, she needs to recognize.
Well, and a wife needs to communicate clearly, as lovingly as possible, that he is my main priority.
Yeah.
Not you.
And you'll lose, Mom.
Mom
and Dad, you're going to lose this battle.
If you fight this battle, you will lose, and you will lose access to your grandkids.
Yeah. Don't
do that.
Yeah. That's just,
don't do it.
It's foolishness. Yeah.
For the sake of pride. And so I'm just assuming a lot of things here, but I'm assuming everyone in this situation needs to knock their pride down a notch.
Yep.
And just love one another. So
but
they're all professing believers. They're going to church together.
Yeah, but I think that conversation is going to be more received by the daughter going to her parents and saying, look, guys, I mean, we want to come as a family, and I don't like this split up. And these are the things that I'm identifying that are triggering this. And so, can you guys work here? I'll work on the other side.
Yep.
You know, I would strongly suggest that. Another issue that's playing in here is they didn't feel like they could go to their pastor here
because they all go to church.
Because they all go to the same church together, which really bothers me.
Yeah, that's weird.
I've mediated between two
bunch of times
family members that are coming, or two families that are coming, and that's a role of pastor. So I wouldn't take it out of his hands just because you think that's a conflict of interest for him. I'd let him be able to navigate that if possible.
Well, frankly, that's his job.
Yeah,
like exactly. He's literally got disunity in his church.
He's going to strive for unity. Hopefully, if he's worth his salt.
He may not even know about this. Mm-hmm. So it's like I feel like this is something the pastor should know about.
As we talk about the sins of women, and we haven't, but it's been a snake we've talked about. One of the sins of women is that they manipulate men by withholding information that they need to make good, informed decisions about. Oof. So they'll keep their husband in the dark about something because they know if I tell my husband, he'll deal with this and he'll do X, Y, and Z. To me, that's a blatant sin of women. And you might be doing that to your pastor right now by not allowing him to come in and shepherd and make this clear.
Yeah. Well, and he may be able to sit down with your parents and be like, hey, guys, can y'all work towards this?
For the sake of unity in the church and in your family.
And then him sit down with this woman and her husband and do the same thing.
Yep.
He could be the mediation that could absolutely change this relationship entirely.
Yep.
So I don't know this woman's pastors, and I don't know the situation, but I mean, yeah, I can't imagine. If somebody came to me with this, it wouldn't be like, there would be no like, oh, I can't believe that I've got it. This would be oh man, can you meet tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like, let's deal with this.
Yeah.
And so I don't know her pastor, but I would think if he's a good pastor, that he's going to go to bat to help fix this.
Yeah, he's going to recognize that anger has set in, bitterness has set in.
Yep.
And these walls have gone up, and now it's impossible to have fellowship together.
Yep.
One of the things possibly to look at is the book of Romans. The whole book of Romans is written to tell people, two people, Jews and Gentiles, how they can have a dinner.
Just look at the whole book of Romans.
how they can eat a meal together.
Yes.
That's just a real quick summary of what's happening in the book of Romans.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, he says a lot of stuff theologically at the beginning, but that's basically how the whole book is ending. How can Jews and Gentiles who oppose each other and have different worldviews, how can they sit down and have a meal together?
Yep.
And it might be a good exercise to go through that.
Sure. Yeah, I would encourage, if you're out there listening, and any of you ladies who may be in similar situations, do not take what I said about the husband maybe being a jerk, a selfish jerk, do not take that and use that on your husband and accuse him of that. I mean, unless you never want to see your parents again, maybe.
This is another one of the sins of women, is that in a counseling situation, they'll read something in a blog, some counsel, some advice, and they'll write it on the end of their bat, and they'll go swing it at the head of their husband.
Yeah.
And they never do that. Nobody should do that.
He'll get this snake in his text messages. This will be the snake on the table, the only one he's ever heard, and she'll be sending it to him.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Hey, I got to tell you a story before we end here. This is so good. Yesterday,
is it applicable?
It has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
Yesterday, we were getting some straw for our animals out here, and we went to Lowe's to get it. And we got a hay.
Animals?
Yeah, so we got a cat outside, and needs to have straw and stuff. So, so they're warm, right? Because I'm not bringing them in the house.
Oh, yeah, God give
exactly.
them fur.
But anyways, we go to Lowe's, and they were buying a hay bale, and the guy is getting it, the old farmer, and he goes, let me shake it, make sure there's not a snake inside this one. Shakes it like this. My wife comes unglued. She's like,
she's never put up hay before.
Yeah, she didn't want that in the car. She didn't want to do anything with it.
When I was a teenager,
she hates snakes,
bro,
on the table.
He was right. Like growing up, I used to go put up hay with a guy, and every so often you're going through the field throwing them on the trailer. Every so often there'd be a snake that got hung up in there, and half of it would be out of the hay bale doing like that, trying to get itself loose.
I was assuming it's just because of warmth.
Well, in Lowe's probably. Yeah, he was probably just saying that for Michelle's sake.
So this is a very complex thing. We threw some stuff out here. Hopefully there's something in here that might have helped you. If you've got a question for us, you can write to us at snakeonthetable@gmail.com, and we'd love to maybe interact with that.
Just make sure and respect your husband.
Yeah, and look out for snakes and lures.
Hay bales. It's straw, not hay. God bless.